It wasn't just another day. I realized it the moment I got out of my truck and saw the curtains in the living room tightly drawn. Melanie always kept them open, especially around this time when the sunlight poured in perfectly, lighting up the wooden floors we had carefully chosen together. But today, the house felt off. It was cold, silent, and seemed like it was holding its breath. I wasn't supposed to be back home this early. I'd planned to stay at the job site, finishing up the Megan Alford contract. But then Pete, an old Marine buddy of mine who's now a cop, had called and needed to talk. After we grabbed lunch at the diner, I had this restless feeling, like I was stepping into something I wasn't ready for. I pushed the front door open and immediately saw the note. It was sitting on the console table in the hallway, neatly folded with my name written across the front in bold, almost frantic handwriting. It wasn't Timothy or Tim, like Melanie would write, but Campbell, the way my foreman Rodriguez calls me on site. That wasn't Melanie's handwriting. The atmosphere in the house felt heavier now. I stood still for a moment, keys still in hand, my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, I reached for the note, the paper crinkling as I unfolded it. The words hit me like a punch. Timothy, she's been lying to you. I've been where you are now. You don't deserve this. Look under the bed. There was no signature, no explanation, just those words written with care. My hands gripped the paper tightly. My first thought was that it was some kind of prank, but something deep down told me it wasn't. Something told me this note wasn't a joke. I glanced toward the staircase. My pulse started racing, the sound of it deafening in my ears. There were no sounds coming from upstairs, no phone conversations with Melanie, no rustling of Greta's papers as she worked on her college apps. Just silence. I climbed the stairs, each creak of the wood beneath my boots making me more aware of the note in my hand. I pushed open the door to our bedroom, half expecting to find Melanie there, but it was empty. The bed was half made, the duvet hanging off the side. Melanie's heels lay abandoned in the corner, just like they always were when she hurried out. I paused for a moment, still clutching the note tightly. My gut twisted as I crouched down and lifted the edge of the bedspread. My hand trembled as I reached under the bed, fumbling until my fingers brushed something smooth and cold. It was a phone, a second phone. Not Melanie's sleek silver one with the glittery case, but a plain black burner phone. My throat tightened as I pulled it out, staring at the dark, accusing screen. I pressed the power button and the phone lit up. No password, no lock screen. Just a string of messages right there for anyone to see. Can't wait to see you tonight. Does he suspect anything? He won't be home for hours. Come over now. My chest tightened, and it felt like I couldn't breathe. The timestamps were recent, some from earlier that morning. The sender's name was just Jay. My mind raced, flipping through everyone we knew, everyone she worked with or talked to, and then it hit me like a punch. James Blomfield. The school board member, the one who was always around at charity events, always hanging around a little too long at our barbecues. I gripped the phone so hard my hands started to ache. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway pulled me out of my thoughts. I moved to the window and peeked through a gap in the curtains. It was Melanie's car. She was home. I didn't think. My feet carried me down the stairs, still holding the phone, my knuckles turning white. The front door opened just as I reached the bottom. Melanie froze when she saw me. Her smile, the one she always used, faltered for a brief moment before snapping back into place. "You're home early," she said, her voice casual, almost too casual, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Shock, maybe even fear. "I wasn't invited to the party," I replied, my voice calm but firm, holding up the burner phone. Her eyes widened, and I could see the color drain from her face. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I took a step closer, watching her back up, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Who's Jay?" I asked, keeping my voice steady but sharp as steel. She didn't answer. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy, like a wall. I held up the phone again, its black screen reflecting her pale face. My mind raced, a swirl of anger and disbelief, but I kept my voice even. "Jay?" I repeated. "Who is it?" She swallowed hard, her eyes darting away from mine. It was a tiny reaction, almost too small to notice, but it was there. A hint of guilt, like a soldier caught in a lie. "Timothy?" she said, but her voice was weak. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't!" My voice was sharp, cutting through her weak denial. "Don't lie to me, Melanie." "Not now." She stepped back, her hands twisting the strap of her purse like it could protect her. "It's nothing. Just a friend from the board." she stammered, her words tripping over each other like a poorly rehearsed speech. "We were just talking about the fundraiser next week," she said. I let out a bitter laugh, a sound so humorless it even shocked me. "At 11:30 at night, he won't be home for hours. Come over now. That's part of the fundraiser plans." Her face collapsed, and for a moment I thought she might break down. But then she straightened up, crossed her arms, and her expression turned defensive. "Why are you going through my things, Timothy? How long have you been spying on me?" The change in her tone hit me like a slap across the face. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't denying anything. She was turning it all on me. My stomach churned as I looked at her, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built a life with. "I found a note," I said, holding up the crumpled paper. "Not from you, someone else left it here. It said to look under the bed, so I did, and I found this." I held up the burner phone once again. "And now I want answers." Her eyes flicked to the note, and I saw it just for a second, a flash of recognition before she quickly masked it. But I saw it. Someone had tipped me off, and she knew exactly who it was. "That's private," she said, her voice trembling, but now her defiance was cracking. Her hands dropped to her sides, and for a moment she looked lost. "I never wanted you to find it this way." "This way?" I repeated, my anger rising. "How many ways are there to find out your wife's been sneaking around behind your back? Enlighten me." Tears welled up in her eyes, and at that moment she seemed to crumble under the weight of it all. "It's not what you think, Timothy," she whispered, barely audible. "It's complicated." I shook my head, the words stinging in my mouth. "Complicated? You mean like the lies, or the excuses, or the fact that you brought this into our house? Our bedroom? You thought I'd never find out?" She looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Why do it? Why lie? Why throw away everything we've built?" Her hands flew to her face and she sobbed into them, her shoulders shaking. For a moment I just stood there watching her break. And despite everything, despite the anger, the betrayal, the hurt that clawed at my chest, I felt a pang of pity. This wasn't the woman I had married, the strong, confident woman who could handle anything. This was someone else, a stranger. She lowered her hands, her makeup streaked, her eyes red and swollen. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't know why. I was lonely, Timothy. You're always working, always at the site, always distracted. And I felt invisible," she added, her voice barely above a whisper, like I didn't matter anymore. The words hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I'd heard her complain about this before, in passing, during little arguments that flared up and then quickly faded. I always brushed it off, thinking it was just the usual couple's frustration. I never imagined it could lead to something like this. "Lonely?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "So instead of telling me, you told him, James?" She flinched at the name, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Anger surged through me again, stronger this time, and I took a step back to gain control. "How long?" I asked, my voice as cold as I could make it. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her lip trembling as she searched for the right words, but there were none. Finally, she met my eyes and whispered, "A few months." Months. My hands clenched into fists. I thought of all the late nights, the school board meetings, the charity events. All the times I had trusted her. All the times I let her go without question. "You brought him here?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "To our home? While I was out working?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. I turned away, my chest tightening as I fought for control. Every memory, every shared moment, every time I had looked at her and felt proud of the life we had built, it all felt tainted now, corrupted by her betrayal. My eyes landed on the family photo on the wall. The three of us, smiling on the beach from last summer's vacation. Greta's arm around both of us, the waves crashing behind us. That smile felt like a lie now. "Timothy, please," Melanie said behind me, her voice raw. "I'm sorry." I cut her off, turning back to face her. "Don't," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Just don't." She opened her mouth to speak, but I was already walking toward the door. My boots echoed on the hardwood floor, each step heavier than the last. I grabbed my keys off the console table and yanked the door open. "Where are you going?" she called after me, her voice cracking. I didn't look back. "To figure out what's left of my life," I said, stepping out into the cool evening air. The door slammed shut behind me. I drove aimlessly, the road stretching out before me like a question with no answer. The anger had settled into something darker now, a hollow ache in my chest. Betrayal isn't just pain. It's the disorientation of realizing the ground beneath you was never solid to begin with. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. The last thing I needed was Melanie's voice or her apologies, which I was sure would start flooding in soon. I couldn't stomach her explanations or excuses, not yet, maybe not ever. Eventually, I found myself in the parking lot of a bar I'd never been to before. The neon sign buzzed faintly, casting the name Billy's Place in flickering blue and red. It wasn't my usual place, but that was exactly what I wanted. Anonymity, distance, a place where no one knew me, where no one would ask about my life shattering into pieces. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale beer and fried food. A jukebox in the corner played a mournful country tune, the kind of song that felt like it was written just for my current situation. I slid onto a stool at the far end of the bar and ordered a whiskey neat. The bartender, a rough-looking guy with a salt and pepper beard, didn't ask any questions. He just poured the drink and moved on. I stared at the glass for a moment, watching the amber liquid reflect the dim light above me. The faces of my life swirled in its surface, Melanie, Greta, and even James Blomfield's smug grin. I drank the whiskey in one long gulp, the burn in my throat barely making an impression against the fire already burning inside me. "Rough day?" a voice asked, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced over and saw a man a couple of stools down. He looked about my age, wearing a worn flannel shirt and jeans. His face was weathered, but his blue eyes held a quiet understanding that made me hesitate. "You could say that," I replied, my voice flat. I wasn't in the mood for small talk, but the man nodded as if he'd expected my response. He raised his glass in a silent toast before taking a sip. "Name's Jack," he said after a moment. "Let me guess, work trouble or something worse?" "Worse," I answered, surprising myself with the blunt honesty. Normally I'd brush off questions like this and keep my problems to myself. But something about Jack made me pause. Maybe it was the quiet way he asked, as if he already knew the answer. "Ah," he said knowingly, setting his glass down. "The kind of trouble you can't leave at the office." "Wife," I nodded, and Jack let out a low whistle. "Cheating," he said, the word hitting me harder than I expected, even though I had been thinking it all night. I nodded again, my jaw tightening. "Yeah." Jack leaned back, studying me for a moment. "That's a hell of a thing," he said finally. "I've been there." I looked at him sharply. "You have?" He nodded, his face darkening with memories I didn't ask for. "My ex-wife," he said slowly. "Found out about her and my best friend 2 years ago, thought the world had ended." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Turns out it didn't. Just started spinning a little differently. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and true. I wanted to ask him how he got through it, how he put himself back together, but before I could speak, my phone buzzed again. This time, curiosity, maybe even a bit of masochism, won over. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It wasn't Melanie. It was Pete, my old Marine buddy. The message was short, direct, and sent a chill down my spine. "We need to talk. Urgent. Call me when you can." I frowned, my fingers hovering over the screen. Pete wasn't the type to exaggerate or waste words, and the timing felt too coincidental. I stepped outside the bar, the cool night air cutting through the haze of whiskey and betrayal clouding my mind. I hit the call button, and Pete answered almost immediately. "Timothy," he said, his voice low and serious. "Where are you?" "A bar," I said bluntly. "What's this about?" There was a pause on the other end, faint sounds of papers shuffling in the background. "I've been looking into James Blomfield." Something's not sitting right with me. My grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Pete said carefully, "he's not who he says he is. His name came up in a financial investigation we've been working on. There's some shady stuff going on with his charity work, money laundering, tax fraud, and that's not the worst of it." My heart began to pound. "What's the worst of it?" Pete hesitated as though searching for the right words. "We think he's been targeting families in his circle, getting close to the wives, manipulating them. He's done it before, Timothy, twice at least. Same pattern every time." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Manipulating them. The thought made my skin crawl. I thought back to every time James had been around Melanie. The charm, the lingering touches I had ignored. The way he always seemed to know what was going on in our lives. "You sure about this?" I asked, my voice tight. "As sure as I can be without hard proof," Pete said. "I thought you should know." I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, Pete's words sinking in. This wasn't just about Melanie anymore. This was about a man who had played us both. who had walked into my home, smiled in my face, and ripped my life apart. "Thanks, Pete," I said finally, my voice cold. "I'll handle it from here." I hung up and stared out at the empty parking lot. The distant hum of traffic filled the silence. My mind was a storm now, thoughts and plans colliding and sharpening into something dangerous. James Blomfield thought he'd won, but he'd forgotten one thing. I don't lose. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. Pete's words repeated in my head, each one sharper than the last. Manipulated, targeted, betrayed. James Blomfield hadn't just intruded on my life. He had orchestrated it. My anger burned hotter with every mile, consuming the pity and sorrow I'd felt earlier. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a goddamn ambush. The house loomed ahead, its lights glowing warmly against the dark. It looked the same as it always had. But now it felt foreign, hostile, like a set on a stage where I no longer played the lead. I parked the truck at the curb and killed the engine, sitting in the dark for a moment as I gathered myself. Through the front window I saw two figures moving inside. Melanie, of course, and him, James. My blood boiled at the sight of them together. Their shapes blended in the dim light, laughing like everything was normal. I didn't have a plan yet, but I didn't care. The rage inside me was enough to propel me out of the truck and up the driveway. I didn't bother knocking. The door slammed open with such force that the frame rattled. The sound startled them, and they froze mid-dash laugh dot. Their heads snapped toward me, frozen like deer caught in headlights. James was the first to recover, standing up from the couch, trying to act like nothing was wrong. He flashed that same confident smile, the one he always used as armor. "Timothy," he said, spreading his arms as though he were about to welcome me into my own damn house. "You're home earlier than expected." I didn't answer him. My gaze was locked onto Melanie, who stood behind him, her face pale. Her hands were clenched tightly at her sides, betraying the tension in the air. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice low and sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Timothy, it's not what it looks like," Melanie stammered, her voice trembling. "Not what it looks like?" I barked, taking a step closer. "It looks like my wife and the guy who's been sleeping with her are having a nice little evening while I'm out busting my ass for this family." James stepped forward, hands raised as if to calm me down. "Timothy, you need to take a breath." "Let's talk about this," I snapped, stepping right into his space, my chest nearly brushing his. "Don't you dare tell me what I need, James," I growled. "You walk into my house, you sit on my couch, and you think you can play me for a fool. Who the hell do you think you are?" Melanie moved quickly, placing herself between us, hands raised in desperation. "Please stop. This isn't helping." I turned to her, my voice cold and steady. "Don't defend him. Not after everything." Her eyes welled up, and for a second she looked like she might crumble again. But James put a hand on her shoulder, steadying her, and that single intimate gesture set me off all over again. "You really think this guy cares about you?" I spat, pointing at him. "You think you're special? He's done this before, Melanie. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you about the other families he's wrecked?" James's face darkened, his confident mask slipping for the first time. "That's enough," he said, his voice tight with warning. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know plenty," I said, taking a step closer. "I know you're a parasite. You worm your way into women's lives, into their families. And I know you're going to regret ever walking into mine." He scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "You sound paranoid, Timothy. Maybe you should take a step back and think about how you've been neglecting your wife. Maybe this is a wake-up call." The picture frames rattled from the force of my words, and Melanie screamed, rushing forward to pull me away. "Timothy, stop it!" she cried, her voice breaking. James raised his hands defensively, his eyes wide with fear now. "Jesus, man, calm down. You want to go to jail for assault?" "Try me," I growled, my grip tightening. "Because trust me, that'll be the least of your problems." Melanie wedged herself between us, forcing me to let go. James stumbled away, smoothing his shirt and glaring at me. "This is exactly why she feels the way she does," he said, his voice trembling but defiant. "You're a bully, Timothy. No wonder she turned to me." The words were meant to sting, to justify everything, but all they did was make me laugh. A dark, bitter laugh that echoed in the room. "You're pathetic," I said, shaking my head. "Both of you." I turned to Melanie, the woman I'd loved and trusted for years. "You let this happen," I said, my voice raw with anger and grief. "You let this piece of garbage into our lives, into our home, and now look at where we are." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. I was done caring. I grabbed the burner phone from my pocket and threw it onto the coffee table. It slid across the surface and stopped in front of James. "You left this under my bed," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "Real smart." His face went pale and Melanie gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Timothy, I didn't—" "Save it," I snapped. "I'm done listening to your lies." Without another word, I turned and walked out the door. The cool night air hit me like a slap, but it wasn't enough to clear the storm inside me. I climbed into my truck, the engine roaring to life as I tore out of the driveway. They thought they'd played me, but the game wasn't over. Not yet. The drive away from my house didn't feel like an escape. It felt like retreating. To regroup, rethink, decide my next move. My truck tore down the streets, the engine roaring as loudly as the anger bubbling inside me. I didn't even know where I was going. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't stay there. Not with them. The burner phone still burned in my memory, just a symbol of their arrogance, their carelessness, leaving it under our bed, the place where my wife and I had once been happiest. That thought stuck in my mind like a splinter, refusing to dislodge. I didn't notice my surroundings until I pulled into an empty lot. The skeletal remains of an old drive-in theater loomed under the moonlight. It was desolate and quiet, the kind of place where a man could sit alone and lose himself in his thoughts. I killed the engine and the silence hit me like a wave. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white as I tried to steady my breathing. But the images came flooding back. Melanie's tear-streaked face, James's smug grin, the sound of my own voice shouting accusations. I felt like I'd been sucked into someone else's life, like this couldn't possibly be mine. After a while, I leaned back in the seat and pulled out the crumpled note that had started it all. The words stared back at me, sharp and haunting. "Timothy, she's been lying to you. I've been where you are now. You don't deserve this. Look under the bed." I read it again, and again. Someone knew. Someone had been here, in my house, close enough to see what was happening. Who would risk leaving a note like this? Who would care enough to warn me, but not enough to stick around? And then it hit me. The handwriting. It wasn't Melanie's, and it wasn't anyone else's I recognized outright. But there was something familiar about it. A rushed urgency I couldn't place. I unfolded the paper completely and examined the edges, the creases. Something was scribbled faintly in the corner, almost invisible in the dim light. I turned on the dome light in the truck and squinted at the markings. It was a smudged letter and part of a number, a room number. J227. A hotel, maybe? A motel? I turned the note over in my hands, hoping the answers would somehow reveal themselves. Then I remembered. A few weeks ago, Melanie had mentioned an upscale hotel downtown, the Jefferson. She'd said it was for a school board meeting, and James had been there too. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, and my anger flared up again, hot and sharp. I threw the truck into gear, my foot pressing hard on the accelerator as I sped toward downtown. The glow of city lights on the horizon felt like a beacon, guiding me to the answers I needed. The streets grew busier as I neared the Jefferson Hotel, a towering glass building that screamed excess and self-importance. Parking was a mess, but I didn't care. I left my truck in a loading zone and stormed through the lobby, my boots echoing sharply against the marble floor. The receptionist glanced up from her computer, startled by my abrupt entrance. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her polite tone strained. "I need to know if someone's staying in room 227, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but failing miserably. Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, but I can't give out that information," she replied. I slammed the note down on the counter. "Look at this," I demanded. "Someone left this in my house. It's connected to this hotel, room 227. I need to know who's staying there." The receptionist stared at the note, her face unreadable. "Sir, I really can't. It's personal," I interrupted, my voice lowering. "And I'm not leaving until I know." She hesitated, glancing around the empty lobby before leaning forward. "I could lose my job for this," she whispered. "But room 227 was checked out earlier today. A woman," she added. She didn't leave a name. I'm sorry, that's all I remember. My heart sank and raced at the same time. "What did she look like?" I asked quickly. The receptionist hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable. Middle-aged, dark hair. Seemed nervous. That was all she could give me. I leaned back, still clutching the note in my hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. Someone had been here. Someone who knew the truth about Melanie and James. Someone who wanted me to find out. "Thank you," I said, my voice hollow as I turned and walked out of the hotel. Back in the truck, I sat for a long moment. The note lay on the dashboard, staring back at me. Dark hair, nervous. The description nagged at me. It wasn't Melanie, obviously. Someone else. A colleague, maybe? Another woman from the school board, or someone from James's world. Whoever it was, they had answers, and I was going to find them. The drive home from the Jefferson Hotel was a blur of conflicting thoughts. Part of me wanted to focus on the mysterious note writer, to figure out who they were and why they'd intervened in my life. But the larger part of me, the furious, broken part, was consumed by thoughts of Melanie and James. Their betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a violation of everything I'd thought was sacred. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. No sign of life. Maybe Melanie had left. Maybe she'd gone running to James. The thought twisted in my gut, sharp and relentless. I sat in the truck for a few minutes, staring at the house that used to feel like home. Now it was just walls and a roof, empty and cold. I stepped inside cautiously, half expecting another ambush, but the silence was complete. My footsteps echoed as I moved through the house, checking room by room. Our bedroom was empty, the bed still unmade from earlier. Her things were gone, her purse, her shoes, the jacket she'd left slung over a chair. She had left, at least for now. Good. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling the note from my pocket again. The scribbled room number taunted me, a lead just out of reach. The description the hotel receptionist had given was vague. Middle-aged, dark hair, nervous. It wasn't much, but it narrowed the field. Someone from James's or Melanie's circle. Someone who'd seen what they were doing and decided I needed to know. But why the secrecy? Why not come to me directly? As I stared at the note, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The sudden noise startled me, and for a moment I considered ignoring it, but when I glanced at the screen, Pete's name flashed and I grabbed it immediately. "Pete," I said, my voice low. "Tell me you've got something." There was a pause on the other end, the sound of papers shuffling. "Timothy, I looked into it further," Pete said, his tone serious. "You were right about James. He's not just some sleazeball hitting unmarried women. He's part of a larger operation." My stomach tightened. "Operation? What the hell are you talking about?" Pete sighed. "It's not just about money laundering and tax fraud. James is tied to a group that specializes in targeting families, wealthy, influential ones. They worm their way in, exploit weaknesses, and dismantle them. Financially, emotionally, it's all about control." The words hung heavy in the air. "You're saying he's doing this on purpose?" I asked. "That Melanie?" "She's a pawn, Timothy," Pete interrupted gently. "They groom these women, play on their insecurities, isolate them from their husbands. Then they use that leverage to extract whatever they need. Money, connections, favors. It's a game to them, and James is damn good at it." My grip tightened on the phone. The anger that had simmered since the note exploded into full-blown rage. "So what do I do? How do I stop him?" Pete hesitated. "You need proof," he said finally. "Something that ties him directly to the operation, something that exposes him for what he is. Proof." I thought of the burner phone, the messages, the faint trail of breadcrumbs leading back to James. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. "And Melanie?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "What do I do about her?" Pete didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was softer, almost regretful. "That's your call, Timothy. But if I were you, I'd get her out of this before it's too late. She might not see it now, but she's in over her head." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Pete. Be careful," he said, his tone sharp as the call ended. "These people don't like being exposed." I ended the call and sat there in the dark, my mind spinning. Proof. Exposure. The words weighed heavily on me, like the task ahead was more than I could handle. But there was no other choice now. James had wormed his way into my life, and Melanie had let him. But I wasn't going to let him destroy what was left of it. I grabbed the burner phone from the coffee table and scrolled through the messages again. Each one felt like a dagger, but they also felt like ammunition. Somewhere in this mess was the proof I needed. I just had to find it. As I set the phone down, headlights cut through the living room window. I froze, my heart rate quickening. A car pulled into the driveway, its engine idling for a moment before it turned off. The front door creaked open and footsteps echoed through the hallway. Melanie stepped into the living room, her face pale and drawn. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "I didn't think you'd still be here," she said softly. I leaned back in the chair, crossing my arms. "You think I'd just leave?" Her eyes darted to the burner phone on the table, then back to me. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't, I said, my voice cold. I'm not in the mood for more lies. She hesitated before slowly sinking into the chair across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was suffocating. Finally, she broke it. I didn't know how to tell you, she said, her voice trembling. About James, about everything. I laughed bitterly. You didn't know how to tell me you were seeing another man? That's rich, Melanie. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't let up. What's worse is that you brought him into our lives, into our home, and you didn't stop to think about what it would cost. I was scared, she whispered. He made me feel... Don't, I snapped. Don't you dare say he made you feel anything? He used you, Melanie. You let him. Her tears spilled over, but I didn't care. The pity I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by something colder. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. If you want to fix this, you'll tell me everything now. She looked up at me, her lip trembling. Everything? Everything, I said, my eyes locking onto hers. No more lies, no more excuses. Start talking. Melanie sat there, her hands twisting together in her lap as tears streaked her face. Her makeup, always so perfectly applied, had started to smudge, making her look more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. For a brief second, I almost softened. Almost. I don't even know where to start, she whispered, her voice breaking. Try the beginning, I said flatly, crossing my arms. You don't leave this room until I know everything. She nodded, sucking in a shaky breath. It started at one of the board meetings about 8 months ago. James approached me after everyone else had left. He said he admired my work, how much I cared about the school programs. It wasn't like anything inappropriate at first, just compliments, encouragement. I scoffed, shaking my head. Encouragement? That's what you call it? The man's a predator, Melanie. He spotted your insecurity from a mile away and pounced. Her face crumpled at my words, but I didn't care. She needed to face the truth, just like I had. He made me feel seen, Timothy, she said, her voice barely audible. Like I mattered, like all the hours I put into the school, into our family, weren't just expected. You were always so busy with work, and I thought I was just a part of the background. Her words stung, sharper than I wanted to admit. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her that my work was the reason she and Greta had the life they did. But I held back. I needed information, not excuses. And when did it stop being innocent? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She flinched. A few months in, he started texting me. At first, it was about board meetings and fundraisers. But then, it got more personal. He'd ask how I was feeling, if I was happy. He said things that... She stopped, her hands tightening into fists. Things I should have ignored. But I didn't. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. And when did it go from text to whatever the hell this is? Her lip trembled. About 4 months ago, he invited me to lunch, said it was just to discuss some ideas for a new fundraiser. But then he kissed me in the parking lot afterwards. My chest tightened. I had to force myself to stay seated, to keep my voice steady. And you didn't stop him? I told him it was a mistake, she said quickly, her voice breaking, that it couldn't happen again. But he kept pushing. He'd show up after meetings, find reasons to call me, to spend time alone. I tried to push him away, Timothy. I swear I did. And yet here we are, I said bitterly, gesturing to the burner phone on the table. Here we are with evidence of late-night rendezvous under our bed. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. But I wasn't moved, not anymore. Why didn't you stop? I pressed, my voice sharp. Why didn't you tell me what was happening? Because I was scared, she cried, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to face you. And then he started saying things, threatening things. I froze. Threatening how? She wiped her face, sniffing hard. He said he'd tell you about us, that he'd ruin me, ruin our family. He said he had connections, that he could destroy everything we've built if I didn't keep seeing him. The room felt colder suddenly, like her words had sucked the air out of it. So what? I asked, my voice tight. You thought the best way to protect our family was to keep being with him? To let him manipulate you into betraying me? I didn't being with him, she shouted, her voice raw and desperate. God, Timothy, I swear I never let it get that far. I couldn't, but he made me feel trapped. Like I didn't have a choice, she whispered, her voice breaking. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time that night, doubt crept into my anger. Had she really been manipulated that deeply? Had James played her that well? or was this just another excuse? You expect me to believe that? I asked, my tone softer but still cold. After everything I've seen? After everything I've found? Yes, she whispered, her eyes locking onto mine. Because it's the truth. I leaned back, running a hand over my face. Her words, her tears, her guilt. It all felt real. But how much of it was real? That was the question. James was a manipulator. That much was clear. But Melanie had made choices too. Choices that had brought us here. What about the note? I asked suddenly, pulling it from my pocket. Who left this? Her brow furrowed as she stared at the crumpled paper. I don't know, she said, shaking her head. I've never seen it before. Think, I pressed. Who else knows? Someone who would care enough to warn me. Her eyes widened slightly, like something had clicked. There was a woman, she said slowly. At the last fundraiser, she said some things to me, things that made me uncomfortable, like she knew about James and me. I thought she was just being nosy. But maybe... What woman? I interrupted. Who was she? I don't know her name, Melanie said, her voice trembling. But she had dark hair. She looked nervous. I think she was there as a guest of one of the other board members. Dark hair. Nervous. The same description the hotel receptionist had given me. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but the picture was still incomplete. I'm going to fix this, I said finally, standing and grabbing my jacket. One way or another, I'm going to fix this. Melanie looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. Timothy, what are you going to do? I didn't answer, couldn't, because the truth was, I didn't know yet. All I knew was that I wasn't done fighting, not for my family, not for the truth, and not for myself. I drove through the quiet streets, Melanie's words still ringing in my ears. The woman at the fundraiser, dark hair, nervous. She was the key to all of this. The note, the warning, the tangled mess Melanie had dragged me into. But I had no name, no way to find her. Just a vague description and the gnawing sense that time wasn't on my side. My first thought was Pete. If anyone could help me track her down, it was him. I pulled into the parking lot of a diner near his precinct and dialed his number. It rang twice before he picked up. Timothy, Pete's voice was cautious. What's going on? I need your help, I said bluntly. Melanie mentioned a woman at the last fundraiser. Dark hair, nervous. She thinks the woman knew about James and her. Maybe she's the one who left me the note. Pete sighed heavily. Timothy, this is getting messy. If James Blomfield is part of what we think he is, involving civilians... I don't have a choice, I interrupted, my voice hard. She's the only lead I have, Pete. Can you help me or not? There was a long pause on the other end. Finally, he said, Give me what you've got. I'll see what I can do. I told him everything Melanie had said, every detail I could remember. Pete promised to dig into the fundraiser's guest list and see if anyone matched the description. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. After hanging up, I sat in the truck for a while, the quiet pressing in around me. My thoughts churned like a storm. The pieces of this nightmare swirling together without forming a clear picture. James's manipulation, Melanie's betrayal, the mysterious woman. It all felt too big, too tangled to untangle alone. I glanced at the burner phone on the seat beside me. It was still unlocked, the messages glaring at me like accusations. I scrolled through them again, my stomach twisting with each one. The messages told a story of lies and deception, but they also told me something more. There were timestamps, giving me a timeline of their meetings. If James was as arrogant as I suspected, he hadn't covered his tracks as well as he thought. A message from 2 weeks ago caught my attention. Meet me at Campbell Park. Usual spot. 8 p.m., Campbell Park was on the other side of town, a quiet place with a small lake and a walking trail. I hadn't been there in years, but the mention of a usual spot made my gut twist. How many times had they met there? How many lies had Melanie told me to cover for it? I didn't hesitate. The engine roared to life as I pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward the park. The streets were darker here, the neighborhoods quieter. When I pulled into the park's gravel lot, it was nearly empty, save for a lone sedan parked under a flickering streetlight. The air was cold as I stepped out of the truck, my boots crunching against the gravel. I shoved my hands in my pockets and started down the trail, the burner phone still clutched in one hand, the usual spot. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I'd recognize it when I saw it. The trail wound around the lake, the water shimmering faintly in the moonlight. And then I saw it, a bench tucked away near a cluster of trees. It was secluded, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. The kind of place two people might meet if they didn't want to be seen. I walked toward the bench, my heart pounding. Something glinted in the moonlight, and I crouched down to get a closer look. A bracelet. Its delicate chain broken, lay in the dirt beside the bench. It wasn't Melanie's, I knew that much. Her jewelry was all gold, and this was silver, adorned with small, colorful stones. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. There was an engraving on the inside, faint but legible. For Jay, always. Jay. The letters stared back at me like a challenge. James? Or someone else? I slipped the bracelet into my pocket and stood, scanning the area. There was nothing else. No sign of anyone. The park was quiet, the trees whispering in the breeze, but the bracelet was enough. It was a clue, a thread I could pull on. As I turned back toward the parking lot, I noticed something else. A car parked near mine, one I hadn't seen when I arrived. A black sedan, sleek and expensive, with tinted windows. It didn't belong here, not in this part of town. I walked toward it cautiously, my pulse quickening. The windows were too dark to see inside, but the engine wasn't running and the car was empty. I glanced at the plates, but they were unremarkable. A rental, maybe. Something about it felt wrong, like it was out of place. A faint click broke the silence, and I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. A figure stood near the edge of the parking lot, half hidden in the shadows. They wore a dark coat, their face obscured by the low light. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. The figure didn't answer. Instead, they turned and disappeared into the trees, their footsteps crunching against the gravel. I hesitated for a moment, then chased after them, the bracelet in my pocket clinking faintly with every step. But when I reached the trees, the figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I stood at the edge of the trees, my breath clouding in the cold night air. My fists clenched. They were watching me, someone connected to all of this. Whether it was James, the mysterious note writer, or someone else entirely, they knew something I didn't. The bracelet in my pocket felt heavy, its presence a reminder that I wasn't imagining things. I pulled it out again, studying the engraving. For Jay, always. It had to be connected to James or someone who knew him, but why leave it behind? Had it been forgotten? Or was it a message, just like the note? I walked back to the black sedan parked near my truck, scanning the area for any sign of movement. The lot was silent now, the air tense with the kind of stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I reached for the car door, testing the handle. Locked. I peered inside through the dark windows, but the interior was impossible to make out. Something on the ground caught my eye. A small slip of paper, half hidden in the gravel near the sedan's front tire. I crouched down and picked it up, brushing the dirt away. It was a business card. The edges were creased and worn. Jefferson Hotel Room 227. The same room number scrawled in the corner of the note left in my house. The card was a direct link, a trail leading me straight back to the hotel, where this entire mess had started to unravel. My chest tightened, the weight of what I was uncovering pressing heavier by the second. I slipped the card into my pocket and glanced around the lot one last time before heading back to my truck. The drive home was quiet, the bracelet and business card resting on the seat beside me like fragments of a puzzle that refused to come together. Melanie was still awake when I walked in, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea clutched in her hands. She looked up when I entered, her face pale and drawn, the circles under her eyes more pronounced in the harsh light. "You're back," she said softly. "Obviously," I replied, my voice clipped. I dropped the bracelet and business card on the table in front of her. "Recognize these?" Her eyes widened as she stared at the items. She reached for the bracelet, her fingers trembling. "This isn't mine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen it before." "It was at Campbell Park," I said, sitting across from her. "The usual spot." "You know it." She shook her head quickly, her eyes filling with tears. "Timothy, I swear I've never been there with him. I don't know what this is." I leaned back, studying her. She looked genuinely shaken, but my trust in her was too shattered to take her at her word. "And the business card?" I pressed, my voice hard. "Recognize this?" Her breath hitched. No, I don't." "Room 227 at the Jefferson. Ring any bells?" Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. That's where we met once," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But it was just a meeting, nothing else, I swear." "Right?" I said, my tone icy. "Just like this whole thing was just texting, and James was just a friend." "How much more do I have to find before you tell me the truth, Melanie?" She sobbed into her hands, and for a moment I thought she might break completely. But then she looked up, her eyes filled with desperation. "I'm telling you the truth now, Timothy. Please, you have to believe me. I made mistakes, but I wasn't the only one." I slammed my hand on the table, the sound reverberating through the room. Damn it, Melanie, you let him into our lives. You let him manipulate you. And now I'm supposed to believe you're innocent? After everything? She flinched at my words but didn't look away. He manipulated both of us, she said quietly. Don't you see? He wanted this. He wanted to tear us apart. Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to dismiss them, to hold on to my anger, but a part of me knew she was right. James had played us both, and if Pete was right, he'd done it before. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about control, about power, and I wasn't going to let him win. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bracelet, the business card, the note, they all swirled in my mind, pieces of a picture I couldn't yet see. Melanie's words echoed in my head, her tearful insistence that she'd been manipulated, that James had planned this. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the burner's messages again. The timestamps, the locations, they all pointed to something bigger. And the bracelet's engraving kept nagging at me. For Jay, always. Who was Jay? James. Someone else. The mysterious woman at the fundraiser? The questions kept piling up. But one thing was clear. James Blomfield wasn't done with us. If I wanted answers, I'd have to take the fight to him. I'd start at the Jefferson, room 227. The Jefferson Hotel looked different in the daylight. Its sleek glass facade gleamed under the morning sun. The lobby bustled with activity, a constant flow of people coming and going. But I was focused, zeroed in on the task ahead. The receptionist from last night wasn't there, replaced by a younger woman with a cheerful smile. I approached the front desk, my resolve hardening with each step. "Can I help you, sir?" The receptionist smiled, but her eyes flickered with an unspoken question. "Room 227, I said, my voice low and steady. "I need to know who's checked in." Her smile faltered for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out that information." I didn't back down. "It's important," I said, sliding the business card across the counter. "Room 227, I need to know." She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the card and then back to me. I could see the conflict in her expression, but she remained professional. "I'm afraid I can't—" "Look," I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm not asking for a lot. Just tell me who's in that room. You have no idea what's at stake here." She hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I really shouldn't—" "Please," I said, softening my tone just enough. "I'm not asking for much, just— Was the guest a woman? Dark hair? Nervous?" Her eyes darted away, and I knew I'd hit the mark. She sighed, leaning in closer. "She checked out yesterday," she whispered. "She didn't leave a name, just paid in cash. But she did ask if anyone had been asking about her." That sent a jolt through me. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing," the receptionist said quickly. "I didn't know anyone was looking for her." I nodded, my mind racing. Whoever this woman was, she was running scared. But from James or something else? "Did she leave anything behind? A bag? Papers?" I asked. The receptionist hesitated again, then nodded. "A notebook," she said. "Housekeeping found it under the bed after she left." "Where is it now?" She disappeared into the back office, returning a moment later with a small, leather-bound notebook. She slid it across the counter, and I snatched it up, my heart pounding. I didn't open the notebook until I was back in my truck, parked in a shadowed corner of the hotel lot. The leather cover was soft and worn, the pages inside filled with neat handwriting. My hands shook as I flipped through it, the pieces of the puzzle finally starting to take shape. The entries were meticulous, documenting interactions with James Blomfield in chilling detail. The writer, whoever she was, had clearly been keeping tabs on him for months, maybe longer. There were names, dates, locations, mentions of other families he'd targeted, the manipulation, the affairs, the financial ruin. It was all there, laid out in stark black and white. One entry made my blood run cold. Timothy Campbell, construction contractor. Target identified through Melanie Campbell's school board connections. Husband has substantial assets, including equity in multiple properties. Primary weakness, trust in wife. Melanie is unaware she's being used. My chest tightened, and I had to set the notebook down to catch my breath. This wasn't just about Melanie. This wasn't just an affair. James had chosen us, planned this, used my wife as a pawn to dismantle everything I'd worked for. I flipped to the next page, where a list of names stared back at me. Names of other victims, other families. At the bottom of the list, a name jumped out, Catherine Dutton. I racked my brain, the name tugging at something buried in my memory. Then it hit me, the woman at the fundraiser. Dark hair, nervous. Melanie had mentioned her. Was this Catherine's notebook? The final entry was shorter, rushed as if written in a moment of panic. He knows I've been following him. James is getting reckless. If I disappear, this notebook has everything. Give it to the authorities. Room 227. He'll look there first. My hands tightened around the notebook. Catherine had left this behind as a warning. A last-ditch effort to expose James. And now it was in my hands. I drove straight to Pete's precinct, my grip on the steering wheel iron tight. When I walked into his office and slapped the notebook on his desk, his eyes widened. "What's this?" he asked, flipping it open. "Everything you need," I said, my voice hard. "It's all there. Names, dates, details." James Blomfield has been doing this for years, and he almost got away with it. Pete's face darkened as he scanned the pages, the weight of the revelation settling over him. This is big, Timothy. If this checks out, we can take him down." "Then do it," I said, my jaw tightening, "because I'm done playing his game." By the time I got home, the weight in my chest had eased just slightly. Melanie was waiting for me in the living room, her face pale and drawn. I dropped onto the couch across from her, the exhaustion finally catching up to me. "It's over," I said, my voice flat. "I gave everything to Pete. James won't get away with this." Her lip trembled, and tears filled her eyes. "Timothy, I'm so sorry for everything." I looked at her, the woman I'd loved for so many years, now a stranger in so many ways. I didn't know if we could fix this. I didn't know if I even wanted to, but for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. "It's not just about us anymore," I said finally. "It's about making sure no one else goes through this." She nodded, wiping her tears. "What happens now?" I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Now we wait, and we see if justice catches up to James Blomfield." In the silence that followed, the weight of everything began to settle. The betrayal, the lies, the fight for answers. It wasn't over. But for the first time, I felt like I was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed felt surreal, as if I was living someone else's life. Pete called 2 nights later, his voice tense but triumphant. "We've got him," he said. "James Blomfield is in custody." The words didn't bring the rush of relief I'd expected. Instead, they left me feeling hollow, as if the fight had taken everything from me and left nothing in its place. James was just the face of the betrayal. The wounds he left behind weren't so easily healed. I sat on the porch the next morning, a mug of coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the quiet street. The notebook had been turned over to the authorities, its pages now part of the case Pete was building against James and his network. Catherine Dutton, if that was her real name, was nowhere to be found. Pete said she'd likely gone into hiding, fearing retaliation. I owed her my thanks, but I doubted I'd ever get the chance. The front door creaked open behind me, and Melanie stepped out, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. She didn't sit, just lingered there, hesitant, as if she was afraid to disturb the fragile peace between us. "Morning," she said softly. I didn't reply right away, my eyes fixed on the horizon. Finally, I said, "What do you want, Melanie?" Her breath hitched, but she didn't leave. "I want to make this right," she said. "For us, for Greta, for everything I've broken." I turned to look at her, taking in the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. She looked as exhausted as I felt. "You can't fix this with words," I said. "Not this time." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the wooden planks of the porch. "I know, but I'm here. Whatever it takes, I'm here." I didn't know if I believed her. Trust wasn't something I could give freely anymore, not to her, not to anyone. But the anger I'd felt toward her had dulled, replaced by a strange sort of resignation. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the enemy, not entirely. "We'll see," I said finally, my voice low. "It's going to take time. A lot of time." She nodded again, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'll wait." Life didn't snap back to normal. It crept forward in fits and starts, halting and awkward, as if testing the limits of what we could rebuild. Melanie threw herself into therapy, both individual and couple sessions, trying to piece herself together. I attended some of the sessions, though I spent most of the time silent, listening as she unraveled the guilt and pain that had driven her choices. Greta came home from college a few weeks later, her usual bright smile dimmed by the tension in the house. I hated what this had done to her. Hated that she'd been dragged into the fallout of something she hadn't caused. But she was strong, stronger than I gave her credit for. She asked the hard questions, forced Melanie and me to face things we might have otherwise ignored. "Are you staying together?" she asked one night, her voice small but steady. I didn't answer right away, glancing at Melanie. She looked at me, her eyes full of the same question. I don't know, I said honestly, but we're trying. That seemed to satisfy Greta, though it left a knot in my chest that I couldn't untangle. Months passed. James's trial became a spectacle. His network of manipulation and deceit laid bare for everyone to see. Other families came forward, their stories eerily similar to ours. I sat in the courtroom for part of the trial, watching as James's carefully crafted persona crumbled under the weight of the evidence. He didn't look so smug anymore. Melanie didn't attend. She said she couldn't bear to see him, and I didn't push her. This was my closure, not hers. 1 year after it all fell apart, I stood in the backyard, staring at the garden Melanie had planted in the spring. It was blooming now, vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the barren landscape it had been before. She joined me there, her hands dirty from weeding, a small smile on her face. "Looks good," I said, surprising myself with the softness in my tone. "It's getting there," she replied, brushing her hands off on her jeans. She hesitated, then said, "Kind of like us." I didn't respond, but I didn't walk away either. We stood there in silence, the evening sun casting long shadows across the yard. I still didn't know if we'd make it. Some days I wanted to believe we could. Others, I felt the weight of everything that had been broken, and I wondered if it was better to let go. But we were here, still standing, still trying. For now, that was enough.